Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, a new study found that a short stroll could help alleviate the health risks associated with a sedentary lifestyle. An exercise physiologist and associate professor at Columbia University joined me to discuss their latest study on this. Could working from home increase a sedentary lifestyle? Then we take a look at our wonderful BronxNet reporter packages. What have our reporters been up to? After that, we take a look back at an interview with a registered dietitian nutritionist for Nao Medical, who shared some amazing tips on how to stay healthy this upcoming year. How can we improve our overall health this year? And finally, one organization is committed to assisting members of the trans community with legalizing their true identity. Director of Pro Bono Services at Legal Services NYC and Staff Attorney for Brooklyn Legal Services joined me to discuss this process. Why might some people need assistance with this procedure? So stay tuned, all this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello everyone, I'm Kibin Alleyne. Today is Tuesday, February 14th, and we want to wish you all a happy Valentine's Day. You are now watching Open, a live program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. Several media outlets report sitting down for prolonged periods of time could be hazardous to your health. Testing to see if these claims had validity, certified exercise physiologist and associate professor of behavioral medicine at Columbia University Medical Center, Dr. Keith Diaz, led a study on this. Dr. Diaz joins me now to discuss the findings and how working from home or at the office could be affecting this. Dr. Diaz, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to talk about this. I think this is a really interesting just conversation. Now, first of all, regardless of where you work, sitting down could be, well, not just simply sitting down, we're sitting down, but sitting down for a long period of time could be hazardous to your health. Can you actually explain, why we're probably seeing that and what those risks are?
Sure. So if you're someone who sits for long periods of time, you have a much higher risk of many chronic diseases than someone who sits less or moves more throughout their day. So for example, you have a much higher risk of things like diabetes, heart disease, several types of cancer, and dementia if you sit for long periods. And you have a much higher risk of dying early.
Now, I know a lot of people are probably really nervous, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Can you just describe what you mean by long periods? Is it like, you're on your computer, maybe playing a game or something? Is that considered too long? What is considered too long?
Yeah, I don't want anyone to freak out. Of course, it's okay for you to sit. The
Right.
key here is not to sit for very long periods of time. And so when you start sitting for 9, 10 hours in total across your day, that starts to get into the hazardous level. And so those are the kind of levels where you're sitting for 3/4 of the day or longer where we start to be concerned.
Now, I think this is so interesting that we're talking about health because I'm curious to know, did COVID affect how, it affected a lot of things, especially how we work. Have you noticed that people have been a little bit more sedentary or just inactive in their lives since we've been dealing with COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've seen, surprisingly, people's exercise habits really didn't change that much for COVID. And in fact, many people, they're actually able to exercise more because they had more time, they weren't commuting. But the problem is many of us leaving our house is a way we get physical activity and we actually get to move. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of that just everyday lifestyle activity that you typically get just to do your everyday tasks, that's what plummeted when people moved to remote work. And unfortunately, we haven't seen an uptick yet of people returning back to those regular activity habits from before the pandemic.
Now, that's super interesting that you said that because I wanted to go in to say, is working hybrid versus remotely, which one is, I guess, better for your overall physical health? I could see definitely on either side. I mean, there could be benefits in regards to that. But what do you think? Is it better to have something that's remote or hybrid?
I think it depends on which format provides you the most flexibility to get movement in. In many workplaces, it's often socially unacceptable for you to take a walking break or step away from your computer, but you can do that at home because nobody's keeping a close eye on you and watching over you. But at the same time, it's really hard for many people, if you live in a small apartment, to find a space to move during your work day, that actually getting out of the house helps you get more physical activity. So I think it really depends.
Right.
Whatever helps you get more activity, the better.
Right. And now that I think about it, like, when you have something that's hybrid, or even, you're working at the office, that commute is a lot, especially like if you take the MTA, there's a lot of stairs. There's a lot of exercise when it comes to just actually just going to work. So I could definitely see, why a lot of people have thought that. Now, sitting for a long period of time, even if you're at the office, isn't a new problem. I know that I remember hearing for a long time a lot of people saying, just sitting at the office at a desk for a long period of time isn't good for you. Why are we seeing this conversation come up again?
Yeah, it's coming up because we've said for probably over a decade now that we shouldn't sit so much. It's really bad for our health. But we didn't have a solution. All we tell people is sit less, move more. And people say, well, what is move more? What is sit less? And so researchers in the last couple of years have been trying to figure out, well, what do we actually tell people? I can tell you should eat 5 fruits and veggies a day. You should exercise for 30 minutes, but we needed a solution to what do I do about my sitting habits? And so that's what researchers have been really focused on the last few years, is giving the public a solution.
And I'm so glad that you said it was for about a decade, because I feel like I remember this for a very long time. And people came up with so many different ways to kind of get people to be active, while they're at the desk. So I'm glad that, you mentioned that this has been a concern for many people for a very long time. Now, according to NBC News, researchers found that even walking for about 5 minutes or just a very short period of time could have, amazing benefits. Can you talk about those benefits?
Sure. So in some of this research that we did, we found that taking a 5-minute walk every half hour reduced your blood sugar levels after eating by almost 60%. And those are kind of levels you'd expect to see if someone was using insulin injections or diabetes medication to control their blood sugar levels. So really astounding effects by just taking regular walking breaks. In addition, we found that it lowered your blood pressure 4 to 5 points. That's about the amount you would expect to see if you exercise. So just taking these short strolls, 5 minutes every half hour, is comparable to medications, is comparable to exercise. I'm not saying it should replace any of those behaviors, but still something really important to consider if you're worried about the harms of sitting.
I think it's very interesting that you said it doesn't replace exercise. So just getting up and walking for 5 minutes isn't considered exercise. So can you just talk about how people, even if they're like, okay, I did my 5-minute walk, how they should still prioritize, being physical and getting some exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. Exercise, I always like to put it this way. If you could package exercise in a pill, it'd be the single most prescribed medication in the history of the planet. Right? It has so many health benefits. And so I need people to understand exercise is still what we should be striving for. But even if you're an exerciser, I think we need to recognize that you can't just check off the exercise box and say, okay, I exercise for 30 minutes. I don't have to move throughout the rest of the day. That's simply not true. Even if you exercise, the harms of sitting still apply to you. And so that's what our message here is. Exercise, but we need to move throughout the day as well.
Now, speaking of moving, I know there's a solution called activity snacks, which sounds so nice. I love the way it sounds. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, the whole idea or notion of activity snacks is that our body just needs regular movement. Our bodies were meant to move. And so an activity snack is just a brief activity period. It's walking for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and just giving your body just regular stimulation, contracting those muscles. That's what we mean by when we say activity snacks. And unlike food, this is a good snack that we should be doing. Like, you should have as many activity snacks as you can throughout the day. The more that you do, the better.
I think I love the term activity snacks. I think it'll bring a smile to anyone's face. It's like, oh, I'm just going to take an activity snack. So I think it sounds amazing. Now, your team conducted a study on this where there were 4 different types of activity snacks. Can you talk a little bit more about what you found?
Sure. So we found, as I mentioned earlier, that taking a 5-minute walk every 30 minutes could offset many of the harms of sitting in terms of lowering your blood sugar, lowering your blood pressure. But I'm sure lots of folks are sitting there thinking, man, I can't move every half hour. Like, that's just not possible. And it's not possible really for my work day either. The good news is that we tried other different strategies that were less rigorous. And we found that a 1-minute walk every hour still offset some of the harms of sitting. Not all of them, but some. So it still lowered blood pressure by 4 to 5 points. And so I think this is good news, is that really folks can move as their job, their workplace, their lifestyle allows them. The more you do, the better, but even very infrequent breaks can help.
Now, in addition to being more active, some people have found, other ways to refrain from sitting down, and that is with standing desks. Now, I really want to know your opinion on standing desks.
Well, my opinion is I think a lot of the standing desk manufacturers have capitalized on the news headlines that sitting is the new smoking and this really harmful behavior. The fact of the matter is that we don't have that much evidence that standing is any healthier than sitting. There's some studies that show it's beneficial, but actually some studies that say it could be potentially harmful. I used to work in retail, shout out to Macy's. Like when I stood all day, my feet were swollen at the end of the day. My back was sore. And so there is concern that actually promoting standing may actually be harmful. And so what I like to tell people, the best posture is the next posture. That don't sit so much, maybe don't stand so much either. Now, in terms of whether you should get a standing desk, we don't know. But what we do know is that movement is beneficial. We've known for decades that any movement you can do can improve your health. And so that's what I would encourage folks to do. If you're debating about what you should do about your harms of sitting, find a way to move more. I'm not sure yet whether standing is something that we should be telling everybody to do.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I was going to suggest, should we stand for this interview? But it wouldn't be helpful, so I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Now, for those who work hybrid or fully in person, how can they implement some activity into their day? I know if you work from home, it's probably a little bit easier to say like, okay, let me just walk up and down a flight of steps. But if you're at the office, it's probably a little bit harder to get that in without getting people to stare at you or just figure out what you're doing. So how can people try to implement more activity in their day?
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do is try to just have it flow within the natural rhythms of your work. And so things like, if you're on the phone call, get a remote headset and walk up and down a hallway. Find a place to walk and talk. Meetings. Do you have to take your meeting sitting? Could you guys go for a walk somewhere outside or inside to get some walking in while you're talking? Other simple strategies we often recommend is have a small water bottle so that you have to go back and forth to that water cooler often. Another great thing to do is, instead of typing that email to your coworker, go walk to their desk. And that's another way just to get some type of movement in. If you're going to take a bathroom break, go to that bathroom that's a little further down the hall instead of the one that's really close. So there's just simple ways that you can implement it without looking like a crazy person who's like sprinting up and down the stairs all the time.
Now, what can people do just to learn more about this? I think anything that is, in regard to health, especially after COVID, people are very interested in learning more about. So how can people see more of your study and just learn how they can be a little bit more active?
Yeah, so there are a lot of great resources online. I think a good place to start are things like the American Heart Association or the Mayo Clinic have really great guidance and recommendations for how to offset the harms of sitting. So I would encourage folks to look to these national organizations that have specific recommendations they can do.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with more Open right after this.
Most hiring algorithms would scream me out.
Some bosses couldn't see me as a leader.
I've run this place for 20 years, but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper.
I've been running code as long as I've been able to reach a keyboard.
This is what I do. It's second nature for me, coordinating 100 details at once.
The way my mind works, I have a very mechanical brain.
I sold them on my skills.
You gotta be so good they can't ignore you.
My magic is
Analytics and empathy. That's how I'm getting clients. You have to have the confidence in yourself to show up and defy the odds.
I am more than who I am on paper.
I never got a college degree. And today, I'm the CEO of my own company. People want to tell me I'm one in a million, when actually I'm one of millions. Stars are all around us. It's time for them to shine.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut. The one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
COVID-19 has changed how we spend weekends with the girls. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to brunching instead of late-night munching. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe? Should I wait?
It's okay to have questions. Now get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back. Our team has been hard at work covering all the various events in and around our borough. Let's take a look.
Zane is a full-time artist who hosted an art show at the Bronx Brewery titled The Bodega Brew. He wanted to showcase imperfections in his artwork and tie it in with the beer.
So the whole collaboration is, to show a different side of my artwork. The whole process of each painting is more to focus on the imperfections than me trying to be perfect. So I just wanted to show that with this collaboration with the beer and have a different atmosphere because we don't really have a lot of art shows in the Bronx like that.
The Bronx Brewery has a program titled the Y Series, where they work with New York City creatives. Creative director of the Bronx Brewery, Jose, tells us more.
We're celebrating the release of Bodega Brew, which is our first release of the year for the Y Series with Zane. The Y Series is a limited release beer that we produce once a month in collaboration with a New York City creative and a community organization.
We got a chance to speak with some supporters of the Bronx Brewery and the artists who shared their excitement for the event.
I actually know Zane, which is the artist who's in the can, and we came here to support him. Super excited for his launch, and it's super dope. And aside from that, he has actual artwork. So another debut, and it's super exciting, and we're just excited to be here.
I'm originally from the Bronx. I come back to visit, came back for a brother's birthday. They know the artist, and they know who owns the brewery. They're very connected with the community. So my younger brother wanted to bring me out and show me something that I've never seen in this neighborhood at all.
The Bronx Brewery is well known for their great tasting beer and their over-the-top events. To learn more about their upcoming events, visit thebronxbrewery.com. For BronxNet, this is Kyrie Moody.
We're here at Van Cortlandt Park for the 50th Annual Manhattan College Cross Country Invitational, where teams have come from all over to compete for the big win. The 2022 Manhattan College Invitational, the 50th anniversary of the event at Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx, did not disappoint and featured a mix of the nation's best high school teams and runners who came to compete.
Today is historical. It's our freshmen won the freshman race for the first time in the history of our school, in the history of this meet. And believe it or not, when I was in high school, my team, we won the original inaugural race. So 50 years later, to have my team win, pretty exciting.
Saturday's event brought in nearly 8,000 runners. It was founded in 1973 by the late Ed Bowes and was one of the first meets to have boys and girls compete on the same day. We spoke to Bronx's very own Ford and Prex track and field runners and asked how do they prepare for an event like this.
So all week we've been training. Monday, since this is our we have home advantage, we live in the Bronx, so we train in Van Cortlandt all the time. On Mondays, we do the back hills. So we did a really hard workout this Monday. Tuesday and Thursdays, we do, easy distance. Wednesdays, we do track workouts. So, it's all in the just staying consistent all throughout the week.
I mentally prepared last night. I was like, I need a good night's sleep. I need to really think of my strategy going in. Our coach is always like, start off easy and then push on those downhills. So that's really my strategy and how I prepared.
And how about you?
Like nice stretching, a little warm up mileage. Every morning before a race, have a little nice breakfast, pancakes, some Skittles, maybe. Just got to prepare.
The event is the nation's largest single-day high school cross-country meet, and Manhattan College Cross Country Invitational has been a staple to Van Cortlandt Park for 50 years. It continues to grow bigger and better every year.
Congratulations to all the teams who made it here to compete for their school. Here's to another 50 years. Reporting for BronxNet, Chanel Thompson.
During a press conference, Governor Hochul announced the Urban Area Security Initiative, which will provide funding for the installation of 2 cameras in every subway car in New York City.
I'm optimistic, and I believe that these will also be a deterrent to people. You're going to be caught if you conduct any activity, where it's an aggressive act or whether it's a violent crime.
The new legislation will also receive funding from the Subway Action Plan, which will bring the price up to $5.5 million, the necessary amount to complete the installations. High-ranking officials have spoken fondly of the effectiveness of security cameras on public transit.
Now we're taking the next step, putting cameras on all the trains. This is a pilot program that has gone from an idea to a full-on all subway fleet program in a few short months. Over the summer, crime in the subway system is down almost 9% compared to over the same period in 2019.
Strap hangers in the Bronx shared their own thoughts on this new initiative.
Safety is like a big issue in the train system. Like, there's a lot of people that come, fight, do crazy stuff. So, especially for young people like me going to school, it's pretty good. And it's gonna make huge improvements. I mean, it will impact the privacy a little bit. Of course, you're gonna have to, but it's still better. It's still better overall.
I think that it'll be beneficial to the city. I believe that it'll improve the privacy and the safety of the people riding the trains. It'll make sure people that do bad stuff on trains will get caught quicker. And I feel like it'll overall just improve the life quality of people that live here. It will allow residents to feel safer in their own neighborhood while transporting to work, transporting to school. Like, students like me will just feel a lot safer in general having these cameras around, just to make us feel more secure.
People commit crimes on the train, like train surfing, breaking windows, vandalism, like tagging and all stuff like that. But I feel like having cameras will assure that stuff like that wouldn't happen. A student like me, feel me, I feel like sometimes I don't feel safe on the train.
I think it will make people feel safer. And when people feel better, that's a good thing for everyone. I don't have a problem with it. If you're not doing anything wrong, then you shouldn't have a problem.
We could either all love it or we could all hate it. But at the end of the day, if they're gonna install it, there's nothing we could do because they're taking our tax dollars to install these cameras. The concern is if you're not doing anything you're not supposed to do, you shouldn't be worried in the first place. So as long as you're being a productive citizen, you should be A-okay.
Cameras will be installed by the MTA in 200 train cars per month. Train cars are expected to be completely equipped by the year 2025. From BronxNet, I'm Christopher Nealon.
We're here at Scott Blue Studios here in the Bronx for a 2-day social event centered around pushing and preserving the culture of art.
Observing and preserving the culture exposes students to the local cultural landscape of NYC. It's an outlet for students as well to learn how to use dance, music, and visual arts to tell their stories. Coordinator and artist of the event, Loyalty Gina May, tells us how she came up with this idea.
It's mainly a private event that I opened up to the public for students who are studying at Union Theological Seminary here over in Morningside. What I would like people to know is that, one, that culture is so important and that we're all a part of the culture, right? We're all cultural bearers, no matter what it is that we do. If we're alive, we're breathing, we're pushing the culture. And so I want people to think about, one, the culture, and I want people to think about what does it mean to them and how do they push it, what are the things that they need to amend, and what are the things that they do in order to bring people to their art form.
There was also a special performance by Luz Solis of the Wabafu Garifuna Dance Company explaining the cultural aspect of dance.
The skills that deals with receiving, responding, valuing. What do I value from my culture? What do I know about my culture? What do I like it? Because the affect has to do with emotion. And we are all emotion, balls of emotion. We make decisions based on our emotion.
Artists like Blue Pablo tells us the art displayed at the exhibition and talks about his own piece.
This is a collection of different artists that we've collaborated with in the past, that we've helped showcase, and that were a part of our magazine and things of that nature. So, you know, these are like a collection of like artists from like Brazil to like even artists in the Bronx that we work with. That piece is called King's Mantra, and that's a representation of being a black man in America and really embodying what that represents, you know, waking up with positive affirmations and realizing the royalty within yourself as a black man and as a black person in America. So that's the mantra that I wake up with.
For more information on where you can find the creative space, photography, art, and small events, you can visit Scott Blue Studios at 348 Canal Place, right here in the Bronx. Reporting for BronxNet, Chanel Thompson.
Emma Ramsey, a local Bronxite, hosts an art show in a Harlem garden titled Eclef Art in the Garden.
We are here today because I'm doing a community outreach, just community event, community art event, just displaying art. Sometimes we don't get a chance or opportunity to go to museums and stuff like that to see art. We have art all throughout our communities, and I just wanted to show some other people the gift that God's given me, as well as share it with them.
Emma had a few surprise guests during the exhibit. One of them happened to be a garden owner herself.
I think community gardens are very important because it's a very needed, welcoming asset to the community. I never met so many people that grew up planting, that enjoy planting. I mean, people do it on their balcony, in their apartment and so forth. And if they could have that space to bring it outside, because they really enjoy it. And then sometimes when they have plants that die in their apartment, they come and ask me, like I'm the plant doctor. And it's my heart to help.
Crystal is the executive board leader of the garden and shares the feeling she had when Emma approached her with the idea of an art show in the garden.
I was excited. I always like to bring art into the community. For one, I'm tired of having to go downtown or go somewhere else to have a good time. Like, it's nice to just sit outside in your own neighborhood with friends or meet new people in your community. So I was all open for it.
Emma goes on to explain one of her artworks she calls the inspiration wall.
This is my inspiration wall, and usually you see graffiti on a wall, and sometimes it's not all the time positive. So I decided to make an inspiration wall where you would have nothing but positive words that encourage you.
This was a beautiful show that the community needed, a refreshing day in the garden. For BronxNet, this is Kyrie Moody.
We want to thank not only our reporters, but our videographers and video editors who also help make these wonderful packages come to life. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.
Even though we didn't grow up together, he's my favorite brother.
Hey, sis.
I'm the baby of the family, and he's the gentle giant.
What you know about Port Georgia?
Man, please, that's a classic.
You know when they say people are a rare breed? Yeah, he's that.
I'm sorry, I'll be back in a few hours.
Don't worry, Shug, you know I'm for you.
I know.
Go get the football.
That was my favorite memory. He was always for you. This is a true story of me, Bridget Floyd, and this guy, George Perry Floyd Jr., my big brother.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Thanks for hearing me out, bro.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay? Is it time yet? It's time. Come start for dinner.
Oh, turn it back on.
Donating pet food is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut. The one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
I know what you're thinking. I need a job.
Well, I've been there.
I've been there.
But you gotta keep going.
You just need the right skills. Find an apprenticeship.
I found a course online.
You can do this.
You will find something.
You will find something new.
Welcome back. Last month, we sat down with Registered Dietitian Nutritionist for Nao Medical, Melissa Darlow, who shared with us her top 10 wellness tips to stay healthy in the new year. We learned so much from this segment and wanted to give our viewers who may have missed this episode a chance to learn more about the different ways they can improve their health. Let's take a look. Welcome back. For most people, a new year means new habits. Across the country, people aim to begin their journey towards a healthier lifestyle. In Nutrition for Nao Medical, Melissa Darlow joined me to discuss the top 10 wellness ways and different ways to stay healthier this new year. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, can you first just talk about your organization, Nao Medical?
Absolutely. So Nao Medical, formerly known as StatCare, was created by Dr. Preeti Jain. She began her career as an ER doctor. In this setting, she truly saw the gap between urgent care and primary care, especially in communities that didn't have access to affordable primary care. From this experience, she really went on and made it her mission to bring healthcare services to these underserved communities. We now have over 15 locations. We offer a variety of services, including immigration health, occupational health, mental health, urgent care, and of course, nutrition health related services.
Now, I really want to talk about, the wellness tips, because I think that's just so important for so many people, as I mentioned, as we begin the new year. What inspired you to create, this list of wellness tips?
So we all know, the new year rolls around. New year, new us, right? Everybody sets out with these ambitions to, this is my year. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. I'm going to run a marathon. So rather than setting out with these, major goals, let's start small. I figured if we have a list, we can pull from that can set us up for success. Can we add a walk around the block twice a week? Can we add extra fruit at breakfast? So starting small and really adding to what we're already doing, it takes the pressure off and it can help set us up for success.
Now, I noticed a lot of the, spots on the list kind of focus on food, which obviously is a huge, it's a huge step in becoming healthier. What are some of the most important tips in regards to swapping out foods or just introducing healthier foods?
So I always like to tell people, don't be afraid to try new things, and stick with me here. So let's say you're a big fan of chicken salad or egg salad, and we know mayonnaise can be a part of that. What if we swapped mayo for Greek yogurt? And I say this because, number one, you're not going to taste the difference, I promise. Number two, you're going to add extra calcium. You're going to add probiotics. It's going to be lower in calories. It's going to have vitamin D. So by making these swaps, which, if you don't like one of them, you can always go through and try more, but you're going to be adding these beneficial nutrients to your diet.
Now, I think it's so funny that you mentioned chicken salad. And I think a lot of people get tricked with this because I'm like, oh, chicken salad's healthy. Like, what do you mean? And then it's like, oh yeah, there's like mayonnaise. That's not a healthy thing. So, what advice do you have for people who can sometimes get tricked by these things that we automatically think are healthy because it's called a salad or, it's just a little bit misleading in regard to health?
Great question. So as we all know, walking through the grocery store, we can see products that say promote heart health or, promotes gut health. So I always like to encourage people, turn it around, check the label. What's really going into these superfoods or superfood ingredients at the store, and just getting a better understanding of what it is you're having for breakfast or lunch or sending your kids off to school with.
Now, I understand there's something called plate method. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the plate method is, imagine you have your plate, split it in half. Fill half of the plate with something colorful. Maybe it's a vegetable, maybe it's some fruit. Just add some color to your plate. That way we're immediately getting fiber. Split the other plate in half. On that half of the plate, put 1/4 as the protein. So think chicken, fish, eggs, the other 1/4 as your carbohydrate. So rice, potatoes, pasta. And when we do that, we're hitting all of our food groups. We're getting all of the proper nutrition in that meal. And most importantly, it's going to keep our blood sugar stable, which keeps us full, keeps us energized, and that's what we want.
Now, I'm so glad that you mentioned color because I also think it kind of makes things a little bit easier when you can just visually look at your plate and say, okay, I need some more color on this plate. So I really love that tip. Now, I really want to talk about becoming active because that is also, another goal that so many people have, and that's just to become active. What are some ways people who still work from home or maybe have a hybrid schedule can be a little bit more active?
Get up. If you find yourself sitting and 4 or 5 hours have passed, go for a quick walk in between a call. If you're in an apartment complex, run up and down the stairs. Your neighbors might think you're crazy, but getting your heart rate up, it breaks up the day, it keeps us energized. And put on some music, maybe dance around your room, just getting that blood flowing and, again, making it work for you. So rather than saying, I have to run for an hour after work,
right,
can we just walk for 10 minutes in between a call? That stuff really adds up.
Right. Or feeling the pressure to go to a gym. It's like you can possibly just do this in your own home. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Now, why do you think people often struggle to stick to these new habits? Because they sound great and we're really motivated when when it's in the beginning, but then let's say maybe a month or two later, it's hard to keep it up. So why do you think people struggle with that?
Two things that come to mind. Number one, we try to do too much at once. And number two, we have really wild, pressures that we put on ourselves. So rather, like we mentioned earlier, than saying, I have to go to the gym every single day, can we add those walks before work 2 or 3 times a week? It helps to remove the pressure and it's more realistic. Who really has time to set aside an hour for the gym every day? But we can all say, all right, let's walk the kids to school. Let's walk to grab a coffee. So just adding that and making it realistic for your routine. And like I mentioned earlier, removing the pressure. Think of these things they're adding to our health. This is all great stuff. So really keeping in mind that you're taking the time to really make improvements for your health, your life, your energy. Anything you do, that's a win.
Now, I really want to talk about access to healthy food or just being active because we talk about that a lot when, we're trying to change our habits. But I think it's just also really important to fully understand the benefits of nutrition. So that could be, as you mentioned, going to the supermarket and reading a label and understanding, what you're reading, or, just anything. What is the benefit of truly understanding nutrition?
Nutrition knowledge is critical. And I'll give you an example. Speaking with a patient who recently found out she had prediabetes. And she says, Melissa, I don't eat dessert. I'm not a candy person. This makes no sense to me. So deeper in the conversation, what are you hydrating with throughout the day? A couple sodas. Oh, how many? 5. 1 Coca-Cola has 40 grams of sugar. So just to do a little math here, 5 sodas in a day, that's going to hit 200 grams of sugar, which is the equivalent to 5 Hershey's bars.
Wow.
So just by knowing that information, knowledge is power. We can make more informed decisions, not only in that direct moment, but for a lifetime.
Now, can you also talk about just ways you can cut down on sugar just by changing what you drink? Because I think for me, I know like drinking so many of your calories or sugar is like, it's not worth it. So what are some tips that you have for people who may struggle with that?
Rather than saying we are completely removing soda from your diet, let's just start by cutting back on 1 a day. So if you're drinking 3, let's go to 2. And also, what are we going to replace it with? So if people know, oh, I love my afternoon Sprite, I need to have it, let's create something new we're going to look forward to. What about an iced tea? Or, adding lemon or mint to your water. So there are still ways to add flavor to promote hydration, but really, again, starting small.
Now, I think this is really interesting. You mentioned that the use of technology before bed could also affect your wellness and your health. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Definitely. So there are tons of research studies out there showing that increased screen time before bed is going to decrease the hormone melatonin, which promotes sleep. So if we're not getting that melatonin going and we're not feeling, ready for bed, and the endless scrolling and our mind can wander, we're therefore going to bed later, waking up in a fog, which can unfortunately, set ourselves up for less productivity, less informed decisions. If we're tired, we're fatigued. So again, we don't have to completely remove cell phones from the bedroom, but what if we say, all right, for 30 minutes before I go to bed, maybe I'll read a book. Maybe I'll journal, just starting there.
Now, I really want to get your opinion. Now that we're on the topic of technology, as a nutritionist, how do you feel about people getting tips from just other people on, let's say, Instagram or TikTok, and they're sharing their experience? What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely, we all know, social media can be the Wild West of information. Everybody, especially around food, everybody eats, so we all can become experts since we are eating. Mm-hmm. I would just encourage people to check your sources. So anyone can go online and spread information, but get curious. What background does this person have to be sharing this level of information? So do your due diligence before following, blind information.
Now, I really want to talk about your organization and the locations that you have in the Bronx. You will soon open another, which I think is pretty cool. Why is this important for people in the Bronx? And can you tell us a little bit about those locations?
Absolutely. So we currently have 2 locations in the Bronx, one in Bartow Mall and then the other on East 174th Street. Our third is coming very soon to Hunts Point. And Nao actually means boat in Hindi and Spanish. And the idea behind the name is that we would serve as a ferry to bring patients perhaps from a time of stress or uncertainty to better health. So by bringing affordable, accessible healthcare to all communities is really the mission of Nao Medical.
All right, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us and really teaching us how to be a little bit healthier this year.
Thanks for having me.
To learn more about Nao Medical, please go to their website at www.nowmedical.com or follow them across all platforms at Nao Medical. We want to thank the wonderful team at Nao Medical for connecting us with Melissa, who shared some amazing tips for us all. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Open right after this.
I'll see ya.
After a basketball game, a black teenage boy, Brandon, reads his texts in his family group chat. Auntie Flo, congrats on the big win. Mom, that's my baby. Brandon replies, thanks y'all. In a park, his sister Maya texts, where are we celebrating? Dad replies, home. Mom texts, I got dinner going. Auntie Flo replies, ooh, I can't wait. Then receives a FEMA flood watch text alert. She texts the family, anyone see that weather alert? We need a plan to stay safe, especially after last year. Ready has a list of resources at
ready.gov/plan. In his workshop, Dad sends a photo of emergency supplies and texts, "Looks like we need flashlights and batteries," leaving a store with a shopping bag. Brandon replies, "I got us covered." Mom texts, "I'll check in with Grandma and Papa." Maya texts, "Thanks, Auntie." Feeling good about this plan.
Got some batteries
Auntie Phil replies, "Love y'all. We gotta stay safe." Later, the family
feel like he gets on every time I see you.
Stay connected. Plan for natural disaster. Ready.gov/plan.
Kids!
I don't want to talk about it.
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 Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency.
Kids, you all right?
This family's prepared. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan. Go to nyc.gov/readyny or call 311 for more information.
Welcome back. For many people, securing a legal name change could alter their life. For members of the trans community, a legal name change is a step towards making their identity on paper match their lived experiences. Director of Pro Bono Services for Legal Services NYC, Adam Heintz, and Staff Attorney for Brooklyn Legal Services, Julian Castronovo, joined me to discuss this process and what they're doing to support this community. I want to thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Adam, can you just talk about the inspiration behind the Transgender Name Change Clinic? I think this is really important because I think for a lot of people, they have a name that they're given and, they don't have to think about that. So, what was the inspiration behind, creating this clinic?
Well, I think you really put it perfectly at the beginning. This is a life-changing, in some cases, life-saving legal service that people desperately need, but they don't have a right to counsel for. So we created the project to really meet that legal need. I should add that we work at Legal Services NYC, which is a large poverty law organization. So we help more than 100,000 people each and every year across all of the essentials of life. So helping people to stay in their homes by fighting evictions, helping people to feel safe, helping people to secure better immigration status. And one of the passions that we have at our organization is making sure that we're properly serving the LGBTQ community. So we were one of the first poverty law organizations to create a unit that focuses on LGBTQ and HIV affected clients way back in the 1980s. So we've known for a long time that low-income LGBTQ people have a lot of substantial legal needs. And of course, getting a name change is one of the most important legal needs that we can meet for our clients.
That's amazing. Now, Julian, on June 24th, 2021, the Gender Recognition Act was signed into law. Can you actually just tell me and everyone else a little bit more about that act?
Yeah, so it mostly affects the name change law in New York, and for the longest time, the name change law in New York was pretty outdated, and it required people to publish their name changes in a newspaper. And for everyone, it created a bit of a privacy concern because it was somebody's name to what they were changing to, which is a pretty private decision regardless of gender identity. And then it also had you explain your address, where you lived, and you put that into the world. And so for trans people in particular, typically people are going from a gendered name to a differently gendered name. With their address, you were outing them not only as trans, but then also explaining where they live. So the Gender Recognition Act took the name change law and kind of modernized it. It took away publication because the legislature forever recognized that publication doesn't actually do what it did in the 1900s. Like in the 1900s, I didn't have Facebook to figure out what was happening with my community. So it took out publication. It made it so that courts couldn't instruct any sort of immigration authorities of a name change because those are totally different procedures. They don't matter to each other, and they just acted as a fear factor to a lot of undocumented communities. And then it also went around various parts of the law, and it made it make sense with the fact that gender and name changes are now a thing. So, for example, parents on birth certificates, if a parent was transgender and changed their name, they weren't able to change the name on their child's birth certificate up until this point. So it went in and also did that, amongst other things.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. That was really eye-opening because I'm like, the newspaper. Like, wow.
Right. Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Adam, what do trans and non-binary people experience, when their ID doesn't match how they present to the world?
It's really an invitation to discrimination for every single person, entity they have to interact with where they need to show their ID. So if you can imagine in your own life, anytime you have to show your ID when you're, trying to access services at a hospital, for low-income people trying to access public benefits, anytime you have to interact with a police officer, even going into a bar, all the different various settings that you have to show your ID that maybe you don't think too hard about that. If that ID doesn't reflect your true gender identity and your name, it's really going to encourage people to both use the wrong name, of course, and the wrong pronoun, but also to recognize that you are transgender if they can see that you're presenting as a different gender than what they see on that ID. And so that means that our clients and transgender people generally with the wrong IDs have to deal with that day in and day out, multiple interactions. Sometimes people express ignorance, sometimes people express hostility, and sometimes people unfortunately express violence or really intense bigotry. But whether a trans person experiences that day when they're going out with their ID or not, they're living with that fear, with that expectation that anytime they're going to have to interact, to go to the hospital, to get that essential benefit, to be afraid of a police officer who's going to be coming and asking for an ID, they're living with that fear throughout their day. And it can really inhibit people's life. It can cause tremendous anxiety and fear. And again, really real impacts of discrimination when they occur. So I think that's a huge piece of it. And the other piece is just emotionally feeling like you're not recognized sort of legally in the world as who you are.
Now, what are some reasons that people may actually need assistance with this procedure?
Yeah, well, it should be an easier procedure. And as you heard from Julian, it's gotten better in recent years, but it's still a legal procedure. You still have to prepare a petition. You have to file it in court. There are fees associated with that. You have to comply with notice requirements that the court might order for you. And then you also have to figure out how you're going to update your key identity documents once you have the name change order, which requires additional steps with different agencies through the government. All of those things can be confusing. They can be expensive. They can be hard for people to access. For people who don't speak English fluently, they can create additional barriers. And again, for all the reasons I was just saying before, when you haven't had your name changed formally already, you're fearful of discrimination at every point that you're going to have to be interacting around that. So it's incredibly, important for people to have lawyers to do this for them so that it can be done right, so they don't have to live with that anxiety throughout the process. And with our project, we ensure that pro bono partners also pay all the fees associated with it. So they're with the client throughout the process, they're doing the legal work, and they're paying the fees. So it's just not something that's ever a barrier for a person seeking this relief.
I can imagine that it's probably also just very overwhelming, just like paperwork and just like all this stuff. So I think it's amazing that there's, access, So yeah, I think it's amazing that people are able, just to have assistance with this. Now, Julian, can you just talk about, what is this process like in New York? Who's allowed, to do this? Like, what are the steps in order to get that done?
Yeah, so Adam explained it pretty well, but in terms of who can get their name changed, anyone. The only requirement is that somebody is a resident of New York City, and residency is kind of a flexible standard, but you have an intent to reside in New York City. As long as you meet that, you can change your name. If you're under 18, there's some additional hurdles, burdens that you might have to go through with parental consent. If you are currently incarcerated, you are also able to change your name. So truly anyone can. And just as a reminder, resident of New York City doesn't mean resident of the United States. Somebody who's not, who doesn't have documentation to live in the United States can still change their name as long as they live in New York City. The process itself, for lawyers, it's easy. Right. You fill out a petition. It's kind of like a bunch of yes, no's that's asking you if you have debts and obligations to others. You fill it out, and then you submit it to a clerk. I'll say, even as an attorney, when I go to submit it to clerks, sometimes they give me a hard time. And I think about somebody who doesn't have legal training and doesn't know that they're allowed to fight back with a clerk, or at least argue back with a clerk. There's a lot of hurdles in between these stages that seem easy. So once you fill out the petition, you have to sign it, and then you also have to attach a birth certificate, proof of address, which technically isn't a requirement under the statute, but the court is requiring this now, and a photo ID. And then after that, it goes up to the judge. the judge makes a decision on the papers, the client no longer has to go before a judge to say why they want their name changed. The judge decides based on the petition in front of them, and then you go pick up your certified orders. And I think the way I think about it is like, you got your ticket, you got your golden ticket, and then you have to take that ticket to every agency that has your name to update it later.
And speaking of agencies and just organizations, can you just like let people know what that means? Does that mean like, oh, you have a bill to pay, you have to go to them? Can you just expand on that a little bit more?
It's really confusing because even in our understanding of how we assist people, so we assist people in updating federal identity documents. So that includes social security card and a passport. And like Adam said, our firms pay for that, which is a huge, huge thing because passports are upwards of $150, which is pretty unattainable for a lot of people. And then we also assist people in updating government IDs from New York. So that's your driver's license or your non-driver's ID. That can be a New York City ID, and that can be a New York birth certificate. Now, obviously, our names are everywhere and in a lot of non-governmental organizations and companies. So when it comes to your bank or your school or all of those places, each of those places is going to have a different process. And it's kind of on the individual to figure it out. And that's pretty tricky. But in general, just so people know, at least in New York City and state, they have to accept the name change. And if they don't, not only are they violating a court order, but they're also violating anti-discrimination laws in the city and state.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Adam, can you just talk, just having this access to changing your name, just hearing it right now, it just seems so... I could see, why these services are available. As somebody like myself, I always was like, oh, I wish my name was something else. But it's a little bit different when it's like, when it's attached to your identity. Can you just talk about, why providing this access and, these services are just so important for people?
Absolutely. At a legal aid organization, we deal with a lot of hard things for clients, right? People who are facing domestic violence and need orders of protection, people facing eviction, all kinds of really difficult things. The legal need we just talked about around name changes is immense, but part of what's so amazing about it is that unlike almost everything else we do, securing a name change is liberatory for people. And I really mean that. It's something that frees our clients from all of these strictures of discrimination, this level of fear they've been having to interact with the whole world for, and it allows them to really be their true selves. So I think the impact of getting this service, of having your name changed, and of having it done in a respectful way where you're not struggling to pay the fees, where you're not scared of the process because you have a lawyer throughout it, is really transformative for clients.
Well, I think this is amazing. I've definitely learned so much just in this little bit of time. So I appreciate you both, coming here and talking about this.
Thank you so much.
If you need help with a name change or gender change, please go to Legal Services NYC's website at www.legalservicesnyc.org or follow them on social media at LSNYC News. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and for you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.